Here's a summary of Novo Nordisk's Q2 2025 earnings call, focusing on the key aspects, overall performance and financials. Novo Nordisk reported strong performance in the first half of 2025, with sales growing 18% and operating profit growing 29% at constant exchange rates. However, the company has lowered its full-year outlook for 2025. Key financial metrics: sales growth, H1 2025 18% at constant exchange rates. U.S. operations, 17% growth. International operations, 19% growth. Operating profit growth, H1 2025 29% at constant exchange rates. Gross margin decreased to 83.4% from 84.9% in H1 2024, primarily due to amortizations related to Catalent and capacity expansion costs, partially offset by a positive product mix from GLP-1 treatments. Sales and distribution costs increased by 15% constant exchange rates, driven by increased promotional activities for Wegovy and Ozempic. R&D costs decreased by 11% constant exchange rates, mainly due to prior year impairments, though investments in obesity care and clinical trials have increased. Administration costs increased by 11% constant exchange rates. Net profit increased by 22%. Diluted earnings per share, EPS, increased by 23% to DKK 12.49. Free cash flow, H1 2025 DKK 33.6 billion, a decrease from H1 2024, largely due to increased capital expenditures. Capital expenditures, DKK 28.1 billion in H1 2025, primarily for API and fill/finish capacity expansion. Highlights: patient reach, serving nearly 46 million patients, an increase of over 3.5 million compared to H1 2024. Ozempic received a positive opinion from the EMA for the treatment of peripheral arterial disease in type 2 diabetes patients. In the U.S., weekly Ozempic prescriptions are around 690,000. Wegovy sales increased by 37% in U.S. operations. The company is seeing positive early indicators from the CVS National Template Formulary change, which now exclusively covers Wegovy for obesity. Obesity care sales showed a substantial increase of 58% overall, driven by U.S. 36% and international 125% operations. Rare disease sales increased by 15%. Pipeline progress: subcutaneous and oral amycretin for weight management advancing to Phase 3 development. Initiated a new 80-week Phase 3b trial, Redefine 11, for CagriSema. Collaboration with Septerna for small molecule discovery in cardiometabolic diseases. Expectation of regulatory decisions for Wegovy MASH indication in Q3 2025. Submission of semaglutide 7.2 mg for regulatory approval in the EU. Progress on trials for amycretin, AMAZE program, CagriSema, and coramitug. Potential for semaglutide in Alzheimer's disease with Evoke/Evoke Plus trials. International operations: GLP-1 products drove significant growth, 19%. Wegovy sales in IO grew 335%, excluding Saxenda. Leadership transition: Lars Fruergaard Jorgensen is stepping down as CEO, with Mike Doustar taking over as the new CEO from August 7. Lowlights/challenges: reduced full-year outlook. Novo Nordisk lowered its full-year 2025 outlook for both sales, 8% to 14% constant exchange rates, and operating profit, 10% to 16% constant exchange rates. This is due to lower growth expectations for Wegovy in the U.S. obesity market and Ozempic in the U.S. GLP-1 diabetes market, as well as slower Wegovy penetration in select international markets. compounding of GLP-1s. Unsafe and unlawful mass compounding of semaglutide in the U.S. continues to impact Wegovy's penetration in the cash channel, leading to lower than expected uptake. Novo Nordisk is actively working to combat this practice. China market. GLP-1 sales in China were below expectations due to wholesaler inventory changes and timing issues. Supply disruptions. Periodic supply disruptions impacted GLP-1 diabetes sales in international operations. Gross margin pressure. Increased costs related to capacity expansions and amortizations impacted the gross margin. Rybelsus prioritization. Commercial investment and execution are prioritizing Ozempic and Wegovy, leading to a flattish trend for Rybelsus. Management's forecasts for future quarters/years. Updated 2025 outlook. Sales growth, 8% to 14%, constant exchange rates. Operating profit growth, 10% to 16%, constant exchange rates. Net financial items expected to be around DKK 1.6 billion. Effective tax rate, 21% to 23%. Capital expenditure, around DKK 65 billion. Free cash flow, DKK 35 billion to DKK 45 billion. Capital expenditures, currently in low double digits of sales, expected to gradually decline from the peak as projects are finalized. Long-term maintenance level is historically around 5% of sales. Oral semaglutide for obesity, expected to be launched in the U.S. next year without supply restrictions. CagriSema. Clinical equivalence data will be required, not a full Phase 3 program. Manufacturing for the single-chamber device does not require new builds. Significant risk factors. Competition. The emergence of generic semaglutide in China next year. Regulatory environment. Potential for broad court decisions or Supreme Court involvement regarding compounding practices in the U.S. supply chain. Continued reliance on capacity expansion to meet demand. Macroeconomic factors. Exchange rate fluctuations. Clinical trial outcomes. Success of ongoing and future pipeline development, particularly for high-risk, high-reward opportunities like Alzheimer's disease. Most important statements from the CEO, Lars Fruergaard Jorgensen. Guidance reduction. Let me just reiterate that we don't take our guidance reduction lightly. We treat that with utmost seriousness. Confidence in execution. We have strong conviction in our ability to drive commercial execution and get to many more patients that are currently treated than what is treated with our products today. And we also acknowledge that we need to show that in real hard data, and we look forward to doing that over the coming period. Excitement for the future. We're also excited about the pipeline readouts we have for the rest of the year and also looking into next year. Appreciation for the team. Express gratitude to the board, team, and employees, and highlighted confidence in Mike Dowstar to lead the organization forward. Farewell. Thank the investment community for interactions and wish them well as he leaves the company. Most important statements from the CFO, Carsten Knudsen. Gross margin impact. The gross margin decreased to 83.4% compared to 84.9% in 2024. The decrease mainly reflects amortizations and depreciations related to Catalent, as well as costs related to ongoing capacity expansions. Reduced outlook drivers. The lower sales outlook for 2025 is driven by lower growth expectations for the second half of 2025. This is related to lower growth expectations for Wegovy in the U.S. obesity market, for Ozempic in the U.S. GLP-1 diabetes market, as well as Wegovy in select IO markets. Guidance range rationale. The reason why we have the guidance range and the low range is basically to cater for unforeseen events beyond what the trends we're seeing right now. These events could be, for instance, gross to net adjustments in the U.S. Capital expenditures. We are quite close to the peak of our capital expenditures, and once we finalize the assets, you'll notice a gradual decline. This summary provides a comprehensive overview of Novo Nordisk's Q2 2025 earnings call, covering financial performance, strategic updates, future outlook, and key management insights.